Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's your boy Zach here, back with a video. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the 10 points of advice or emphasis that I think um, anyone that's going through this journey of OCD and PTSD recovery should take into account and recognize. There are 10 points of advice that will help you along your journey towards OCD recovery and PTSD healing. Um, so, if you are undergoing this process, there are some things. I mean, you're dealing with your mental health, your mental livelihood. It's not something that should be taken lightly. Um, so, first off, point number one, educate yourself on anxiety, depression. Do whatever you need to do. Listen to podcasts on OCD. Listen to people talking about PTSD, and listen to the experts that really know this disorder inside and out. Um, and if you need to, go see a professional. I mean, they are trained and deal with this stuff on a daily basis. Um, it's hard not to go ask for help, especially when it comes to the highly stigmatized mental health. Um, and it'll help you out in the long run, especially having that support. Just um, do what you need to do to feel comfortable in this healing process, in this ERP and EMDR experience. It's important that you feel confident, and it's important that you have no fear in doing this whole process. So that's my first point of advice, is to see a professional if you need to. Definitely educate yourself. The more education you can do for yourself, the better off you're going to be, the more confident you're going to feel in this process. The second point that I have for you is the ERP. And I say to do this first because um, in OCD, you have these pathways through your brain that are kind of cemented, and they it takes a little bit to start breaking that cycle. It's like a positive feedback loop. You do it once, you do it again, and it just keeps revolving and revolving and revolving. And you want to break that cycle, and I think you want to do it before you do the EMDR and the memory. What would you say? The memory um, restructuring, or the memory reprogramming. Um, yeah, I think it's important to do it, because when you do the EMDR, which is what I recommend doing second, maybe 3 months or so after you start the ERP, you create a void in this emotional memory. You know, our memories are a lot of times formed on the basis of these emotions. So when you go in and you remove this memory, the emotion that's associated with the memory, you also create a void, where you are supposed to introduce more positive emotions, but there is still those pathways that have been highly cemented in your brain, that you need to break up first. You need to decrease the amount of neurons that are just going in this cycle. And when you do that, you'll be able to do the ERP much more successfully. And it won't be so overwhelming. You'll having done all this work previously, your brain's already slightly reprogrammed to not do these compulsions, to not feel overwhelmed, and to kind of have a game plan when you are encountering a stressful stimulus. And so, ERP first. Do it for a while until you feel comfortable that you are able to not do any compulsions when you're encountering a stressful stimulus. And then next, I would do the EMDR. And another point, I actually did it in reverse order, and I did the EMDR, and I was like, I felt better, like hands down, I felt better. But I was also encountering these stimuli, and I didn't quite know what was going on. I kind of did this without professional help, and it all works out in the end. It was just slightly overwhelming when I was encountering these stimuli where I would have previously done a certain response to. All of a sudden, that response was like completely wiped out, and I didn't quite understand what was going on when I was feeling these overwhelming emotions, or the feeling like the need to do something. Um, and Had I done it another way, I would have done the ERP first for a while until I kind of cemented that line of thought in my brain to um, undergo the ERP. So when you do the EMDR and the ERP, afterwards, when you in the interim, when you're doing your daily life, and you are encountering all these stimuli, I think it's important to focus on acceptance. Acceptance is a neutral emotional response. It's like you telling the fight or flight areas of the brain that you have it under control, or it's like kind of like ignoring something. And a lot of the time, that's what you do want to do, is ignore, or not typically ignore, just not even react to the stimuli in order to cement it in your brain that whatever that is, it's okay. It's not. I don't need to do anything in response to that stimuli. And acceptance, it's something I learned about it on a podcast talking about OCD recovery, and it is a new up and coming therapy in response to some of these stimuli that you encounter on your in your daily life. So I highly recommend looking into acceptance, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. It's like a muscle that you work, and I think it's important when you're going through this process. Sometimes you have fears that, like, oh, what if I accept this, and if I just work on this, it's gonna make it like okay in my brain, and then I'm gonna go ahead and do that thing that I was so afraid of doing. It's in that circumstance, stick to your morals, and you are going to see that you have control over what you do and what you don't do, more so than you think. So that leads me into the next point, which is to have no fear. When you are encountering some of these stimuli, when you are going in your daily life, a lot of the time it's the fear that made us go into these positive feedback loops of OCD. And when you don't have any fear in response to these stimuli, you're just telling those centers of the brain, the amygdala, you're just like you're forcing that hand in being like, hey, everything's okay, like I got it under control. Even though your brain, you might be freaking out, as long if you don't do anything in response to that fear, that pathway is going to be uncemented, and those neurons are going to break apart and form new connections in your brain. And another point to that, I think it's hard sometimes not to respond to these stimuli. So one method that one practice that really did work for me was to be in the moment. Sometimes we get overwhelmed with this fear of something that's coming in the future. And if you are in the moment, you are present, you are not thinking about the future, you're not being fearful of the future, you are just being in the present moment. And that gives you a lot of power. It gives you a lot of space to feel these emotions, and it keeps you caught up in the moment. It doesn't keep you um, ruminating about certain aspects of your day, whatever you might be fearful of. And when you are in the moment, I mean, even when you're just talking to somebody, it's like you're just focusing on exactly what they're saying. You're listening, and then you're gonna have like authentic conversations with people without having flashbacks, or even just when you are in the moment and you are having a flashback, or you're having some type of obsession or something. You just refocus on the moment, and that will just cement that pathway in your brain to disregard any type of intrusive thought, or obsessive thought or rumination about something. It keeps you caught up in the moment so that you can have these authentic conversations with people while you're going through this recovery process. And it also helps when you are dealing with a compulsion, a desire to do a compulsion. It's somewhat like acceptance, in that you are being in the moment, you are accepting whatever emotions that you're feeling without necessarily doing a response to any of those feelings and emotions. And over time, you're just going to retrain your brain to be in the moment and accept these emotions that you're feeling. um, the next point that I've done a lot more towards the end of this journey. It's exercise. Exercise is a natural antidepressant. It releases all these endorphins in your body that help you feel good. It makes it a lot easier to not do any compulsions, um, and also to just accept whatever's going on in your life at the moment, and whatever emotions you're feeling. You're just going to be better able to accept those feelings, and you can move on. And on that point, what about medications? um, Sometimes it is important to at least get you jump started on that path to of ERP and staying in the moment. Sometimes medications can help. I don't think they're a good thing for long term, but if you need it in the short term, you know, you need that little bit of extra help. I think it's worth it to at least give it a shot. And I do think marijuana or CBD is something that a lot of people have not um, really. There's not a ton of research on it, but I do think, and in my experience, especially the CBD, it does help downplay some of that anxiety that uh, is really sometimes distracting when you're trying to recover from this, and ignore any type of intrusive thought or overwhelming emotions. So yeah, I do think that they can be helpful, and you should talk to a professional about it. The next point I want to convey is to trust yourself. A lot easier said than done, but um, when I was going through this, I would be obsessive over the fact that the my faucet might be running, and I don't remember shutting it off. Um, and when I would go and check, that would be my compulsion. I would go and check to see if the water was running, and it never was. I don't think one time it was ever running. And over time, I just started to trust myself. Even if I started to have that thought of like, did I turn the water off? Is something running in my house? Is that like the stove is on? Um, I started to trust myself, and uh, it also helped me to just focus on doing things right the first time, and not focused on making sure I did things right. Doing it right the first time, and not making sure I not going back and making sure I did things the right way. Um, so I think that trusting yourself gives you a lot of power to be in the moment, to be doing these your tasks, whatever it is, correctly, and to not get um, off track, to go back and recheck everything and stuff like that, unless it's like part of your job or something like that. So yeah, trust yourself. It's hard to do sometimes, but it is essential for this recovery process, and it's part of the journey. You just gotta learn to trust yourself. It'll give you so much more confidence going forward, and it's essential for this recovery process, in my opinion. Um, the next point is having a positive outlook. I think it's important to have a positive outlook, because when you start having like pessimistic thoughts, you start having like worst scenario thoughts, like you aren't doing yourself any favors. You're actually probably releasing more stress hormones. And when you have a positive outlook on something, more optimistic, like everything's gonna be okay, you're gonna start releasing more serotonin, which is important to help you feel better. When you're having these positive outlooks, it's so much easier to move on with your daily processes without having fear. And physiologically, you're going to be doing yourself a favor and getting those positive hormones circulating in your bloodstream, and not the stress-inducing ones. So positive outlook is key. And This next point, I think it's important to live your life. Relive some of these points in your life, where you were, you weren't thinking the correct way, and to go back and begin to think the right way, the way that you're training yourself to think in response to these stimuli that you've countered in the past. I think your brain holds on to it, obviously, especially with the PTSD. I mean, all it takes is some stimulus to induce you into PTSD. Um, Going forward, you have to be fearless when you are confronting. I wouldn't say confronting, but you are encountering these stimuli. You need to go back and relive a lot of the things that you did previously, thinking the correct way. This is a thought disorder, so um, you need to go back and revisit points in your life, um, in order to have your mind let go of these past stimuli, so that it's gonna free up your mind to move forward. And I noticed when I would go home to Spokane, Washington, and I revisited some of these places. Like it was like my brain, in response to that stimulus that was overwhelming previously, it's like it really just like let it go. It's like, oh, it's not so bad anymore. Um, and I felt it. I just felt like it was like almost like I just felt better. I felt like I just released a lot of this crap that I'd been holding on to, just in being exposed to the same environment, where I was previously having a negative experience. Past places of work, um, areas that you used to go. I think it's important to just go and revisit them with a renewed mind and a renewed outlook and a renewed um, way of thinking. And it's just gonna your mind's just gonna let go of all the stuff that it's been holding on to, and you'll even notice that with the EMDR. All it took was encountering a few stimuli after I had done the EMDR therapy, and my mind was just like, whew, just like you could. It's like you can almost feel it in your mind. It's like it's just letting go of these responses that you had, and it really does feel good. So be fearless and revisit your past. Confront, not confront, but revisit it, and you'll be amazed at the difference. It was pretty cool when I did do it. The last point here um, is to stay strong. It's a long process, especially the OCD recovering. The EMDR, it's pretty much like just like that in the moment when you remove some of these negative memories. EMDR, that's it. It is instant and it's permanent. And the ERP, it takes energy. It's it's sometimes really hard emotionally to get through some of these days, especially when you are down, which is a lot of the time it takes us to be at that point to actually go and get help. And from there, you kind of got to dig yourself out of this hole, and you just got to stay strong in climbing out of that hole. Like it's tough. You'll have good days, you'll have bad days, um, but don't get distracted from the goal, and that is recovery. And yeah, just stay strong. It's a long journey, but it is so worth it in the end. It is absolutely the difference between night and day. It's amazing to say the least. And yeah, where I'm at right now, I'm pretty much at the end of my recovery process. I'm focused in. I'm ready to move forward in life with a renewed sense of self, a renewed purpose, and new ability to just take what's in front of me and do with it how I please. And yeah, those are my 10 points of advice, 10 points of emphasis for this journey in OCD and PTSD recovery and healing. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. Leave comments in the comment section, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Um, Otherwise, stay strong out there. All right, peace.